probably do their own research and they're watching this, they'll probably have heard of a thing called tinnitus retraining therapy, not to be confused with the other TRT, but tinnitus retraining therapy.
It was a testosterone replacement therapy.
Yeah, totally different podcast.
Yeah.
That's the other episode.
That's how I gain muscle when I'm sleeping.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Dr. Cliff Show. I'm Cliff Olson, doctor of audiology and co-founder of Modern Tinnitus. And today I'm joined once again by some very special guests from Neurotone AI, the co-founders of Neurotone AI, Dr. Miles Aron and Rick Carlson. Thanks again for sticking around with us, because we just did an episode talking about Lace AI Pro, but that is not the only thing that you guys are doing over there at Neurotone. In fact, I don't know how you guys find time to do all this other stuff.
Yeah.
But you guys have a new tinnitus app called Tinnitus Pro that I really just wanted to kind of hang on to you guys for a little bit longer so we could talk about this. But
sure.
Give the viewers who maybe didn't watch the other episode an understanding of what Neurotone AI is.
Yeah, sure. So our company, we're focused on the brain. Is the shortest way I can say it. As you know, and as probably some of you out there in the audience know, your brain is really responsible for processing 100% of the sound and turning it into meaning. And so we've got a product that we call Lace AI Pro. It's auditory training, it's oral rehab, and it allows patients to practice really the second half, and I would argue absolutely just as important as getting a signal to your brain, which is what the hearing aids do, but taking that signal and turning it into sound into meaning. So that's what we're famous for, if you will. We've been working in one way or another for 2 decades on that, and then we recently tackled another brain problem, which is probably going to be a surprise to most of the folks listening to this, with our Tinnitus Pro app. And just to jump to it, the common thread there is that tinnitus is actually a problem with the brain. People think that they're hearing a sound, but that's not a sound. It's not a true sound. It's not your ears producing it. It's actually a phantom sound, if you will, that your brain is producing. And so we looked at that and thought that there might be an opportunity here to help patients and practitioners. You know, the pro in our name, whether it's Lace AI Pro or Tinnitus Pro, is indicative of the fact that we help professionals like yourself, as you know. And so we've got these consumer-facing apps with Lace and Tinnitus Pro, but there's a back-end system that allows practitioners to, frankly, offer better care by monitoring patients and keeping patients engaged and so forth. So we've created this new product, Tinnitus Pro. We think it is far and away, honestly, and I hate to sound like this, but we think it's absolutely the best product on the market. We brought together a number of different treatments under one umbrella, and I think I'll turn it over to Miles to talk about what those treatments are. And then we've made it engaging and interesting and something that patients want to do from a product side, and I'll probably come back and talk a little bit about that. So,
you know, there's a lot of individuals who have hearing loss and tinnitus, and then we also have some individuals who have tinnitus alone with really no hearing loss. But everybody's looking for something for help for their tinnitus, and that's why, you know, co-founder of Modern Tinnitus, Dr. Craig Casper, and I kind of partnered up to do some biometric tracking or biometric monitoring is what we like to call it, for individuals who have tinnitus, so we can have some objective understanding of how their tinnitus is impacting them, and then things that they can do to improve their biomarkers to improve their tinnitus. But there's also a whole variety of different things that you can do from a tinnitus perspective, and Tinnitus Pro is addressing several of those things that you can do to have improvement on your tinnitus. So enlighten the viewers here on some of the things that the app can do.
Yeah, absolutely, and we love what you're doing with Modern Tinnitus and the biometric side as well. Just to say that we're definitely excited to see what you and Craig come up with. There are really 3 pillars to what Tinnitus Pro offers. There's sound therapy, which we'll talk about in detail, counseling, which is cognitive behavioral therapy inspired counseling, and there's meditation and mindfulness tools where you can put some of that counseling to work and sort of address the more sensory and emotional and physical aspects of living with tinnitus. So on the sound therapy side, it turns out that there are sounds you can listen to that will actually dull the impact of tinnitus over time. It'll actually lower the effective volume you experience of tinnitus. Or said another way, if you measure somebody's handicap with tinnitus through various clinical surveys, you can see that their handicap also goes way down, like their actual experience of life with tinnitus gets better. And there are a number of different ways in the research that seem to work differently for different patients. And so what we found is that rather than being prescriptive about choosing a winner where the science really hasn't decided, we would actually just provide them all and let the patient and the clinician figure out what works best for them. At the heart of all of this is our Therapeutic Tone Finder. And so what you'll see with other sound therapy apps is basically a white noise machine with maybe some crickets or something you can add on top. Like, that's sort of the standard. But what the research shows is that using a therapeutic tone for your sound therapy that's based on the actual tinnitus that somebody is experiencing, the frequency and the timbre and the quality of that sound, you can deliver a more effective sound therapy. And so at the heart of what we do is the Therapeutic Tone Finder. And we've got, this is something that is the first of its kind. It used to be that you had to sit with an audiologist and it would take quite a bit of time to find your tinnitus tone. It's an iterative process. It happens in the office. It takes time out of the clinic. And so most clinicians don't have time to do that, and so they're not doing it, is what ends up happening. And then the sound therapy devices just don't have the ability to implement that. We've distilled this down into just moving your finger on your screen and listening to what you hear and saying, yes, that's what my tinnitus sounds like. And there's a very thoughtful process that went into what dimensions of the sound we're playing with as you move your finger. And we're taking that data and creating these therapeutic tones that people are listening to.
That's a little bit more advanced than when I went on a hike at West Fork up in Sedona, and I took my phone and recorded a little stream of water that was creating some white noise, which, by the way, is like the most popular video on my YouTube channel.
No way.
So it's millions of views on that video of people. It's looped. It's 10 hours of masking sound,
right?
And people will use that. So it shows you the demand that people, like, it works. Like, masking works.
Yeah,
and if you can have more precise masking for you as an individual, you potentially could have a better masking effect of your tinnitus, right?
Yeah, that's right. And this is what most of the hearing aid manufacturers are putting out, is libraries of the bubbling brook, which is great. It's a place to start. But what we're doing is really trying to push to be right at the cutting edge of the research for what we can do with sound therapy to help patients. We have 4 therapy modes I should talk about. One of them is Habituation Mode, and then we have Adaptation Mode, we have Relief Mode, and we have Sleep Mode. So I can get into detail about all of those. And so Habituation Mode, this is about getting the contrast between your tinnitus and the world to minimize that contrast so that over time you're desensitized. You are conditioned to accept the sound of tinnitus in your life, in a nutshell. I like to use this analogy that I picked up from one of the folks at our company who was an audiologist and told me that I really like it, so I'm going to use it. So shout out to Zach for giving me this one.
Thanks, Zach.
I'll stop stealing it from him. But imagine you've got a candle in a bright room. A candle in a dark room, and that's all. That candle is all you can see. And if that's your tinnitus, then you are focused on that light, right? And habituation therapy is like we slowly turn up the light in the background, and if you had a candle in a well-lit room, you wouldn't even notice it. That's what habituation therapy is. And the way it works under the hood is that we're playing the sound therapy noise at a lower volume. So we're not masking your tinnitus. You actually benefit from hearing your tinnitus just a little bit. We don't want to completely cover it. But over time, the brain is saying, this limbic response, this fear response that I have to this tinnitus, it's saying it's okay. You're not going to be hurt by this, and that habituation therapy helps you do that. Turn the page to the adaptation therapy. This is another approach where, the thinking is that the tinnitus is in your brain. You have this what's called a tonotopic arrangement, right, of neurons. And basically what that means is that different pitches that you hear are actually next to each other and physically aligned within the brain. And so
kind of like a piano keyboard, where like if you were to
perfect
drag your finger across all the keys, like all of those different tones are right next to each other physically.
That's
and
right.
Same thing inside the brain.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's an amazing analogy. And so imagine you've got one key on that keyboard that's broken, and that's sort of like your tinnitus, right? You got this broken piano key playing over and over and yet. Well, what happens is your brain says, hey, there's no sound on this channel. Well, let's turn up the gain and see if we can capture some noise. Something must be wrong. And they crank, your brain cranks up the gain, and then you get this tinnitus sound that can drive you nuts. What we do with adaptation therapy is we take advantage of this idea in neuroscience that if you're getting signal on let's use the piano keyboard, on all the other keys, it'll tell the other key to quiet down. And that's just a well-known neuroscience thing, like, hey, if I'm getting a signal over here, let me tell my neighbors to be quiet. It's called lateral inhibition. And so with adaptation therapy, what we actually do is we play the noise, but we use that therapeutic tone from our tone finder to notch out the noise that represents your tinnitus so that you're not getting input there. And it's the other neurons that are getting input and saying, hey, quiet down, and using that idea of lateral inhibition to actually get your tinnitus to get quieter over time. So that was pretty technical, but just to explain it hopefully a little simpler on the noise side, imagine notching a piece of wood with an axe, That's exactly what we're doing to the sound. We're taking a notch out of the spectrum of sound, we're taking energy out of a certain frequency, and we're using that tone finder to decide the size and the location of that notch to make sure the therapy is effective. And none of that would work without knowing the patient's actual tinnitus sound. And that's part of the magic of the adaptation.
Right. You have to identify what that frequency is to be able to do that effectively.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just to stress that last point again before you get to relief and sleep modes, the real innovation here. So we've got these two competing types of therapy, and as Miles pointed out, some patients respond to one, other patients respond to another. Tinnitus Pro has both, so the patient and the practitioner can see what works best for them. But at the core of this thing is this truly innovative way for a patient to tell the app exactly what they're hearing. Because if you talk to patients, some patients will describe it as a ringing in their ears. Others will describe a sound that's less tonal and more like noise. And in fact, the same patient can have both of those experiences over time. Like they can, when it's really bad, it's more of a tone. And so it can almost move within the same patient. The tone finder, this way to do this, which I think we're probably the only people in the world doing it this way, allows that patient to specify exactly what they're hearing, because that's almost, it's that subjective experience is hard to pull out of a patient. And so the tone finder is a really easy way for the patient to do that. And it's actually, just to go one layer deeper, it's actually a two-stage process. They identify the general tone, and then we have them do it again, but with a finite area so that they can really sort of tune it in. And if it changes over time, they can go back and do it. But when we talked in our earlier podcast about how our dynamic threshold training engine is used to maximize the results of what we're doing on the auditory training side. Here, we wanted to go that extra mile or two to really get that patient's personalized tinnitus tone to power all these therapies, because we think it's the key. We don't think it's the key. The research says the closer you get to the patient's actual experience versus just a generic white or pink noise,
right,
the more effective the treatment will be.
Now, from an ideal perspective of this tone finder here, someone who has an underlying hearing loss, ideally they're treated with hearing aids, and they're actually running this directly through their hearing aids to find that tone.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
If someone maybe who doesn't have a hearing loss or who hasn't treated their hearing loss yet, you could still gain benefit from this using like AirPods or some like a pair of headphones
Absolutely.
that you're Bluetoothing it, right, and you can actually find it that way.
Yeah, and you can use it right on your phone speaker or computer speaker as well.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. And then and we got 2 other therapy modes to cover. I don't want to lose the trail here, but because you mentioned it's the number one, the stream and the pebbles and all that, we have these therapeutic. We have this core therapeutic tone that we're using to deliver the therapy, at the risk of sounding redundant there. But you can also add to it these highly customized soundscapes. So you can add on top of it, you can add the water flowing over rocks and bring in some crickets and create a soundscape that's actually interesting to listen to as well, and relaxing. And so much of this, when it comes to tinnitus, is how the patient thinks about their tinnitus and whether it stresses them out and whether it creates that sort of fight or flight response that causes so much disruption. And so the rest of the sound therapy is the other stuff, and we think we've gone and provided a bunch of like interesting sounds that people can layer on to this core therapeutic tone as well. So it's pretty neat. And that's true whether we're practicing sort of the notching therapy or the habituation therapy as well. So you want to get to
let's dive into the other two.
And those soundscapes, by the way, we as I would did the math on it, and we've got
of course you would.
Yeah, right. I'm the resident nerd here, but we've got 85,000 combinations of soundscapes.
Wow. Okay.
So we're not going to make a hit YouTube channel anytime soon, but if you ever want some soundscapes from us, we'll hook you up.
You could have a whole YouTube channel just with those.
Yeah, let's do it. The next therapy mode I was going to tell you about is relief mode, and this one is pretty, I think, near and dear to our team's hearts, and because it's the button that you want to press when you're having a bad time. The first 2 modes, habituation and adaptation, I talked about, they take to work. It does take months of using the therapy, and it takes an hour plus a day. And so if you can be doing other things, you're putting that sound on in the background or something, but over time you're getting a therapeutic dose, and it does take months to see a difference. There are going to be days where you just want some relief, and that's what relief mode is for. And relief mode, this is more intended for a 1 to 10 minute session. It's just brief. It's a moment of respite from the situation, and we're again using that therapeutic tone to deliver a more like a masking tone. We still advise patients to bring it below the masking level because we always want to promote habituation, but it's a tone you can listen to that will reduce the contrast between your tinnitus and the rest of the world just for a bit to help you sort of relax. And this is a little interesting point about relief mode, but about 50% of patients can experience a phenomenon known as residual inhibition. Not everyone will experience it, but around 50%, where actually the tinnitus will just stop once you've experienced that relief mode sound. And it can stop for minutes to days, depending on the patient. And so that's something from the research we're very interested to see how folks do with it. But for the rest of us, the other 50% and everybody, it's really it gives you a little bit more control over a process that feels like it's out of control. You can press a button and you can get a bit of relief, and that's in your hands and in your pocket and in your ability to do it. And just that, like a big part of tinnitus is just that experience of feeling like you don't have control over this thing that's happening, and the fear response and the quite frankly, the sort of a pain that you experience. So to give a patient something they can do can make all the difference.
Yeah, I call that having a tool in your tool belt that you can break out when you need it, right?
Absolutely, that's exactly it. It's a control thing. I mean, if you don't have a tool like this, the whole situation's out of control.
Right.
And this actually gives the patient some control, a relief valve that they can use when things get really tough.
Super important for someone with tinnitus to have those tools, right?
Yeah.
And maybe not just one tool, but a variety of different tools, right?
Yeah.
That they can use at different times.
So you mentioned that to really get the benefits of the first two therapies, it's like as much as an hour a day. Well, that's a nice segue into our last form of therapy on how you might get that hour in addition to just using some of the other tools. I was going to throw it back to you, but okay.
You got this.
We have sleep mode. We have sleep mode. And so you can, the research suggests that you can actually get the benefit of therapy while you're sleeping. And again, unfortunately, the research on tinnitus, it's not conclusive. I mean, just let's be clear about this. It's not conclusive with which kinds of treatments work best. But there are a number of studies that show your brain is actually less resistant when you're sleeping, and maybe more open, if you will, to receiving treatment while you're sleeping. And so we've got a sleep mode which does the same thing we were talking about earlier. You can put yourself to sleep listening to crickets and water, going over rocks and any number of other relaxing noises, and get a therapeutic tone at a low level that's not disturbing while you're sleeping.
It's interesting. That's why I have 10 hours of babbling brook on my YouTube video,
exactly.
So people can hit play when they go to sleep.
Yeah. And so we've got that as well. And so you've got two forms of sort of direct therapy. I'm going to put the work in here to improve my tinnitus over time. You've got I need a break glass emergency relief mode when things are tough, and then you've got this way to get some therapy while you're sleeping. And people, I was talking to my mother-in-law, and she volunteered. She was using our app, and I said, I didn't know you had tinnitus. And she said, I don't. I just love the sound. It's so relaxing, and it puts me to sleep. And so she's actually using our app without tinnitus, which is kind of...
Well, it's the perfect use case. Like when I go travel, I hate sleeping in a quiet room because I have tinnitus in my right ear. I need something playing. I need some kind of sound to drown out the ringing that I have in a dead quiet room, right? And this seems like a perfect use case for that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So those four modes, believe it or not, we've only talked about 1/3 of the app.
Oh gosh.
So that is just the sound therapy. I mean, we worked really, really hard on providing a comprehensive solution for patients. And so there are two other legs to the stool, if you will, that comprise Tinnitus Pro. And so we have a whole section on cognitive behavioral intervention. And so, as we've already touched upon, how a patient relates to their tinnitus, whether their view is that this is something that is driving them nuts and really bringing out negative feelings and maybe feeling like they're out of control and all those things, versus somebody who practices over time and works hard to have a better attitude, if you will, about it, to approach it in a way that's healthier. It's a night and day difference. And so there are a collection of videos and things that we've got that we talk to patients about inside the app on different strategies and how they might approach dealing with a condition in a way that helps minimize it. And so there's this whole cognitive behavioral intervention side of things, and we think it's just as important as the sound therapy. In fact,
absolutely.
In fact, the research, research is not conclusive on these things. Some say that cognitive behavioral therapy is the key. It's the way to go. And so we've worked really, really hard on that. As you know, because you've known us for a while, we work with Dr. Sweeto and Dr. Jennifer Henderson-Savis, obviously, Dr. Nancy Ty Murray, and these names may not be familiar to the folks listening, but these are legends, frankly, in audiology. These are people who've dedicated their entire lives to these problems. And for some of those folks, it's north of 50 years. I won't name names.
Yeah.
We brought all of their knowledge into the app. And so the CBI, Cognitive Behavioral Intervention section, is really crafted by their collective knowledge and what we can talk to patients about.
Well, that's great because it gives the patient a little bit more control on their own when they're not in their provider's office.
That's right.
Having cognitive behavioral therapy administered potentially there. So again, another tool to give them a little bit more control. And I always say mindset's everything. There was a point in my life where my tinnitus caused me significant mental anguish, and it was my ability to change my mindset around my tinnitus that has helped me out so much over the years.
Yeah.
So, and that's, you could argue, cognitive behavioral intervention is one of those things where you can change your mindset about how you're perceiving your tinnitus.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. So direct therapies, the way you perceive it, and then we've got a third leg of the stool.
Hey, drum roll.
Yeah, go ahead.
Meditation and mindfulness tools. Before I jump into that, though, I'd just say, patients probably do their own research and they're watching this. They'll probably have heard of a thing called tinnitus retraining therapy. And just to connect the dots for them if they're trying to navigate, does Tinnitus Pro do that, or is that in there? It's our habituation mode plus the counseling under the cognitive behavioral intervention. That is TRT, effectively, not to be confused with the other TRT, but
right.
tinnitus retraining therapy.
Was it testosterone replacement therapy?
Yeah, totally different podcast.
Yeah.
That's the other episode.
That's how I gain muscle when I'm sleeping.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
So so the third pillar is this meditation and mindfulness tool. So where the counseling side is giving you the tools to intellectually, parse out your thoughts and your emotions and make sense of the fear and finding opportunity in the day where maybe before you thought there was no opportunity because of the tinnitus, leaving the door open to possibility and all of those things. Meditation and mindfulness tools, they allow you to, they give you the tools to experience the feeling in your body, the sensory experience, the emotional experience, the physical side of it, and to put some of those ideas to work. Meditation is incredibly powerful. There's a body of literature on meditation and tinnitus and how it actually does help with tinnitus. And so is breath work and different mindfulness exercises, and we're going to be releasing more and more of that over time. And just like LACE, Tinnitus Pro is a lifetime license, so patients will benefit from expansions in these different areas as we learn more about it. But the as somebody who's
just what you brought it up, I want to touch on that point for a second.
Sure.
Tinnitus is a lifelong issue, whether you manage it effectively or not. It just is. You mentioned you've gotten quite a bit better because of the practice that you put in, but you still have tinnitus, and you're an audiologist, right?
And I still have to do things to manage it.
Yeah. Exactly right. We're super proud of the fact that this is a lifetime license. We didn't. It would have been very easy, and in fact, there are solutions out there that do this, that offer their platforms as a monthly subscription or an annual subscription and so forth. And what will happen is patients will get significantly better, by the way, using these tools, and then something changes in their life, stress comes back or what have you, and the tinnitus sort of reemerges. And so it really is something that patients will deal with. They can absolutely improve, but they'll probably be dealing with in one way or another for the rest of their lives. And so we're super proud of the fact that we made the decision to make this a lifetime license. If somebody invests in the product, they can be assured that this is something that they can use and get better and potentially put it down for a while or lessen the amount of time they're spending in it, and if it flares up again, that it's there for them.
Right.
And so, it was no small decision on our side, and I think we're the only people doing that. And so I wanted to just call it out.
Well,
before we move
the
on.
next question, and we'll come back to the point that you were making, but people are going to be asking as they're watching this podcast, like, how do I get the app? So what are the ways that they can get the app?
Through our providers is the easiest answer. As I mentioned, in our app, there are naming convention. We have Pro, so Tinnitus Pro. Having a qualified provider, having people like the Modern Tinnitus folks, for example, or other folks that offer Tinnitus Pro is absolutely critical as well. We haven't touched on this, but there's a whole patient monitoring side of Tinnitus Pro that gives back the information to the practitioner about what the patient's doing. We do clinical surveying inside of the app as well, that both the patient and the practitioner can use to see, oh, look, you're actually making improvements. 3 months ago, you said this is how tinnitus was affecting your life, and now, by your own self-reported scores, it's having less of an impact. And so we think that the best way to treat your tinnitus is through a provider, for certain. And so if you want to get Tinnitus Pro, I would just recommend that you can go to our site, and you can find a provider that way.
And I'll put a link down in the description for you guys, of course, if you want to learn more about Tinnitus Pro and where to find a provider who dispenses Tinnitus Pro.
Yeah. By the way, we have hundreds and hundreds of clinics that offer LACE AI Pro, and many of those folks are now bringing on Tinnitus Pro. So if there's not a provider near you today, check back in a month, and they'll be. It's just sort of spreading through the field right now because the product's brand new and it's really been well received.
Perfect. So. Well, I love all the attention that tinnitus is getting nowadays, because I feel like for years, like there was just no help for people with tinnitus. I mean, you could, unless you could argue, like my co-founder at Modern Tinnitus, Craig Casper, has been treating tinnitus for decades out of his Manhattan clinic, and there are other select tinnitus providers who are really good at in-person treatment with tinnitus, utilizing a variety of different tinnitus treatment options for that. But we need to expand and have more options for more people, increase accessibility and things that we're doing, and bring more science behind it, right? Because let's face it, there's a lot of snake oil out there when it comes to tinnitus. You know, these gummies that you can take and these eardrops. I've done videos ad nauseum of all these different products that have absolutely no research backing them. So it's nice to have other research-backed options to provide to patients.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, everything in Tinnitus Pro is based on the science. This is what we do. We would never risk our company's reputation, which is pretty phenomenal, I think, with creating something that's not based on the science. And I think you can tell from this conversation, we're honest about when the science is unsettled, we say that too. And so one of the things we haven't talked about, though, is we actually are collecting this information anonymously. As we mentioned, we provide it back to practitioners. And so as we have many tens of thousands of users using the app, we're going to be able to make our own assessments and share with the world which treatments seem to work best. Like is it really CBI, or is it the notched training versus the habituation, and what is giving people the most benefit, and we'll be able to parse that out based on what the patients are actually doing with the app and the integrated assessments right next to it.
Love that. And that speaks a lot to what Dr. Casper and I are doing with our biometric monitoring, right?
That's right.
I mean, to be able to kind of like even link the treatment side with the biometrics and on the questionnaire stuff, the stuff that you guys are working on, to see, can we be predictive about what things would be beneficial for certain people based on certain things that we know about them, right? I mean, I think that the data behind tinnitus is really going to take a leap forward with what you guys are doing, and definitely what we're trying to do with Modern Tinnitus. And I know that there's going to be individuals who are using Tinnitus Pro who are also monitoring their biomarkers through the Modern Tinnitus Basecamp, and I think that that'll probably be another discussion that we have at some point in the future.
Without a doubt.
Super exciting to see where things are headed with the data side of tinnitus, to make people more confident that they can identify a treatment that actually works for them.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine a scenario and think back to the beginning of this conversation with the personal Therapeutic Tone Finder. Imagine a scenario where we discover that people who are up in this sort of upper quadrant of a tonal type tinnitus sound, the data presents to us that they actually respond better to sound therapy, where people who have this quality of sound or different, biomarkers, heart rate variability, it's just respond differently. They're better with CBI.
Or like these sleep therapies that you're talking about, like we monitor sleep heavily with our biometric monitoring devices. And so identifying that they're getting 10% more deep sleep or REM sleep, right? These things that we know have an improvement on individuals and their stress levels, which can reduce tinnitus perception, right? Like a lot of exciting stuff that's going to come out of this here over the next, probably sooner rather than later, honestly.
No, that's right. We're actively working on all this stuff. The data's being collected right now, and as the user base increases and the integrations take place, this data is going to present itself, and hopefully there's some pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, well, unlike with hearing loss, where to do the deeper studies, you have to bring each patient into the booth and have expensive equipment and a controlled environment. With tinnitus, this is a subjective experience. There is no, measurement. I'm not going into your brain and measuring the firing of the neurons, right? So.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet. All right. But we'll get to this will be the largest study on tinnitus ever. It will be ongoing. We'll be pushing the boundaries of what's possible, much like with the data that you're getting from modern tinnitus as well. But like we're gonna figure this thing out. I think we're gonna learn a lot more about tinnitus, and we're gonna figure out how to bring people a lot more relief over time.
Turning the subjective into objective is really the ideal here. If we can objectify tinnitus and how to approach each individual's own perception of tinnitus and treat it effectively, I mean, that's a game changer. And that's what people with tinnitus are looking for, right? Because right now, they feel like they have to throw a whole bunch of stuff at the wall and hopefully something sticks when it comes to tinnitus. But I think that all three of us here, including Dr. Casper, are trying to solve that problem.
Absolutely, yeah, that's exactly right. And a bunch of other really great practitioners.
Absolutely.
It's just now the tools are coming online to allow us to do it.
I mean, it takes a village kind of thing, right? I mean, I think that you get the providers on board with this, which it sounds like they're getting on board really well. I'm hugely supportive of what you guys are doing, obviously, as you guys know, as we've been working together for the past year. But again, thanks for taking some extra time to talk to us about Tinnitus Pro. I think this is something that a lot of individuals with tinnitus should take some time to inquire about and ask their professional about. If their professional who's a tinnitus practitioner does not offer it yet, they should ask them, hey, why aren't you offering this? And maybe you should reach out to Neurotone AI to see if you can become a partner.
Yeah, and at the risk of going off the cuff here, if you're a patient and there's not a provider near you, perhaps contacting you and seeing we'll figure out something to at least get them the app if they're interested in that. And
again, guys, check out the description of this video. I will have resources in there for you, so make sure that you look at the description, and I'll even put a comment pinned in the comment section for you as well. Want to make sure you guys have the support that you're looking for. So guys, thank you so much again. I don't have another gift for you. I apologize. You got the Dr. Cliff Show mugs. Sorry, I know.
Man, I was playing for an extra mug. But,
double fisting the mug.
I'll tell my wife. He said no, just one mug. So,
awesome. Well, again, thank you guys so much. Guys, if you want more information, like I just mentioned, go to the description of this video. If you like the episode here, give it a thumbs up. Really helps out the channel. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel with notifications turned on, go ahead and do that as well. And we'll see you in the next episode.